My name is Cora Sterling. I'm 29 years old, and for 5 years I hadn't seen a single person from my family. Then Great Aunt Eleanor texted me on a freezing Tuesday, told me my grandmother only had days to live, and asked me to come home one more time. 3 hours after I walked into her hospice room, my sister swept in, announcing she was dragging the whole family to dinner that night to celebrate her promotion, and I was expected to smile through every minute of it. My parents lined up behind her. My aunts and uncles were already on the guest list. My grandmother squeezed my hand and whispered, "End this tonight, my brave girl." Not one person at that table knew I'd been carrying a legal binder in my executive briefcase since 10 that morning. My sister didn't know. My parents didn't know. By dessert, every smile at that table would die. Before I take you inside that dining room, hit subscribe and drop a comment with your city and the time you're watching. I read everyone. Let me take you back to a freezing Tuesday morning, exactly 5 days before Thanksgiving. The clock on my laboratory wall showed exactly 9:14 a.m. I remember the exact time because I was carefully mixing a new botanical serum for my cosmetics manufacturing company, Lumina Labs, when my personal cell phone buzzed. It was a private number, one I hadn't seen in 5 long years, an Illinois area code 312. My heart stopped. I almost dropped the glass beaker. Then, a text message popped up underneath the missed call. It was from Great Aunt Eleanor. The message was a secret code we used when I was a child. "The bluebirds are flying south, Cora." It meant she needed me desperately. I pulled off my latex gloves and dialed her number. She picked up instantly. Her voice was heavy with unshed tears, trembling like a dry leaf in the wind. "Cora, my sweet girl," she whispered. "It's your grandmother, Martha. Her heart is failing. Dr. Lewis says she only has a few days left, maybe less." I put down my clipboard. I didn't cry. My chest felt like someone had dropped a heavy concrete block on it. Through the frosted glass windows of my Chicago-based lab, I watched the first snow of the season falling gently onto the busy city streets. "Which hospice?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "Mercy Care Center, right near downtown Chicago," Eleanor replied. "Cora, your parents don't know I'm calling you. If you don't want to see them, I'll hide you." "I don't care about them, Aunt Eleanor. I'm coming for Grandmother Martha, and I'm coming for you." She sobbed quietly into the receiver. After 5 years of total silence, 5 years of missing family holidays, and 5 years of burying my pain in my work, hearing her voice broke a wall inside me. Eleanor and Martha were the only ones who ever truly loved me. When my parents were too busy spoiling my sister, it was Eleanor who taught me how to read, and Martha who baked me cookies. "Your mother will cause a scene," Eleanor warned gently. "Let her try," I said. I hung up the phone. I immediately walked out of the lab and went straight to my chief scientist, Leo. He looked up from a microscope. "I need to take a few days off," I told him. "Family emergency." Leo, who knew my dark history, just nodded sympathetically. "I'll handle the massive buyout of that new beauty brand on Friday," he assured me. "Take all the time you need, boss." I drove to my high-rise apartment to pack. I carefully placed a vintage silver mirror, a gift from Martha, into my leather suitcase. By noon I was in my black SUV, driving south toward the hospice. The drive was brutal. A massive winter snowstorm was rolling in. 3 hours of blinding white snow and slippery roads. I drove carefully, the heater blasting, reflecting on the last time I saw my family. It was exactly 5 years ago. I was 24 years old, wearing a cheap gray sweater, standing in our family's living room with tears streaming down my face. Let me tell you about the night my family shattered my heart. It was 5 years ago. My parents had invited me over for what I thought was a normal dinner. Instead, they sat me down and announced they were taking the $75,000 seed money my grandfather had left specifically for me to start my business. "We need it for Bailey," my mother had said coldly. "Her luxury destination wedding in Paris went over budget, and her new party planning business is failing. She needs a bailout." I had begged them. I told them that money was my future. My father just rolled his eyes. "Cora, stop being so selfish. You're always playing with those silly chemistry experiments. Bailey has a real life, a real reputation to uphold. Act more like your sister." My sister Bailey had just sat there smirking at her manicured nails, not even looking at me. They completely drained my trust fund. That night I walked out into the freezing rain, absolutely heartbroken. I never spoke to my parents or sister again. I built my massive company from nothing, surviving on ramen noodles and pure willpower. Now 5 years later, I was back. I stopped at a fancy roadside boutique to grab a bottle of water. Walking past the cosmetics aisle, I saw a bright pink display. It was a poster for Glow Up Beauty, the struggling firm my sister just got hired at. The products were heavily discounted, tossed in a bargain bin. I stared at my sister's smiling face on the poster for 5 seconds. Then, I bought my water from a grumpy cashier named Brenda and walked out into the freezing cold. When I finally arrived at Mercy Care Center, the smell of strong bleach and stale lavender air freshener hit me hard. I walked up to room 302. I took a deep breath, pushed the heavy oak door open, and stepped inside. Grandmother Martha looked so fragile, hooked up to a beeping heart monitor, but Great Aunt Eleanor was sitting right beside her, holding her hand. When Eleanor saw me, her tired eyes lit up with pure, overwhelming joy. "My brilliant girl is finally here." Great Aunt Eleanor's voice broke the silence of the sterile room. I rushed to the side of the hospital bed in 4 quick steps. I sat on the edge of the mattress and gently took Grandmother Martha's fragile, bruised hand. Her skin felt as thin as tissue paper, but she smelled like fresh peppermint and old parchment, the exact same scent from my childhood. "Hi, Grandmother. I'm so sorry it's been 5 agonizing years." "You are radiant, my sweet girl," Martha whispered, forcing a weak smile. "Tell me everything. Tell me about Chicago." I leaned in close. I told her about Lumina Labs, about my downtown Chicago penthouse overlooking Lake Michigan, about my brilliant team and my chief scientist, Leo. I told her we were launching a revolutionary anti-aging cream next month. I kept my voice soft. I didn't brag. With Martha and Eleanor, I never had to prove my worth. They just loved me for me. Suddenly, Aunt Eleanor reached into her oversized leather tote bag. She pulled out a thick, sealed manila envelope and pressed it into my lap. "Keep this with you tonight, Cora. The time for hiding is over." Before I could ask what was inside, a snooty hospice nurse named Brenda rudely marched into the room holding a tablet. She glared at me. "Only authorized family members are allowed. Your parents took you off the list. You need to leave immediately." Aunt Eleanor stood up, her eyes flashing with absolute fury. She pointed a shaking finger at the nurse. "I pay the bills here, Brenda. She stays or I'll have your job." The nurse turned pale, muttered an apology, and practically ran out of the room. Seconds later, the heavy oak door swung open again. There they were, my mother, my father, and Bailey. All 3 of them were standing in the hallway like a pack of wolves waiting to strike. They had clearly been listening outside. My mother's eyes were completely dry despite her dramatic gasps. My father had his hands deep in his pockets. Bailey was draped in a loud fake fur designer coat, loudly slurping and holding an iced matcha latte, which I knew was strictly forbidden in the ICU. Nobody spoke for 5 painful seconds. My mother broke the silence. She rushed over and smothered me in a suffocating hug that smelled of cheap hairspray. "Oh, Cora, look at your clothes. Are you struggling to pay rent? You look so exhausted." I didn't hug her back. I shoved her off me with a polite but icy glare. "Hello, Mother." My father didn't move. He tipped his head a fraction of an inch, refusing to make eye contact. "Cora, Dad." Then my sister glided across the linoleum floor like a pageant queen. She leaned over to fake kiss Martha's cheek, then turned her arrogant eyes to me. "Welcome back from the dead, sis. Try not to ruin the holiday spirit." "I came to see Grandmother," I stated firmly. "Well, she's doing fine," my mother interjected, clapping her hands together nervously. "Dr. Lewis cleared Grandmother for our Thanksgiving Eve dinner tonight. We are taking her out for 3 hours. It will be perfect." "What dinner?" I asked, my stomach tightening. My mother grabbed my arm, her manicured nails digging into my sleeve. "We booked a private room at the Golden Prime in downtown Chicago. Bailey just got named Regional Vice President of Glow Up Beauty. It's a massive promotion. We invited 30 people. Mom, I just drove 3 hours through a blizzard. I'm not going to a party." Bailey flashed her perfectly bleached teeth at me. "If you don't show up, people will think you're jealous. Honestly, family comes first. Just come and clap for me." My father finally spoke, his voice dripping with disappointment. "Act like her for one night, Cora. Don't be a disgrace." I looked at Grandmother Martha. She was watching the entire exchange, breathing heavily through her oxygen tube. She knew exactly what a trap this was. Slowly, Grandmother Martha opened her heavy eyelids and stared right into my soul. She squeezed my hand one last time. "Do it, my brave girl. End this tonight." I looked at my great aunt Eleanor. She tapped the manila envelope she had given me. "One dinner," Eleanor said fiercely. "Fine," I said, looking right at Bailey. "I'll be there." Instead of going back to my childhood home where my parents had long ago erased my existence, I drove straight to the Ritz-Carlton luxury hotel. I checked into a spacious corner suite with a view of the icy lake. I took a long hot shower, washing away the smell of the hospital. I changed into a sleek, custom-tailored emerald green pantsuit and put in the diamond stud earrings I bought myself after my first $1 million quarter. As I was brushing my hair, my phone buzzed. It was a text from my corporate lawyer, Mr. Sterling. "The 60-page legal binder for the total acquisition of Glow Up Beauty is ready. Courier is downstairs." 10 minutes later, a courier handed me the heavy leather-bound document in the hotel lobby. I slid the binder, along with Eleanor's secret envelope, into my black executive briefcase. I walked out into the freezing Chicago night, hailed a black car, and headed toward the Golden Prime. The storm was just beginning. The Golden Prime was glowing like a warm beacon through the raging Chicago blizzard as my black car pulled up. I handed my frozen wool coat to the coat check girl and walked straight into the private mahogany dining room at the back of the restaurant. There were 30 people gathered around a massive oak table. The scent of expensive roasted garlic and truffles filled the air. Aunt Penny stood up. She smelled like heavy lavender perfume and mothballs. Uncle Jack was already holding a massive glass of dark bourbon. Pastor Tom took my hand and said he had been praying for my soul. Cousin Maya was aggressively typing the family drama into a group chat on her phone. Grandmother Martha was wheeled in a few minutes later. Immediately, Aunt Eleanor forcefully pulled a chair out and placed herself directly between my father and me. She sat with her back straight, acting as my fierce physical protector against my parents' cold stares. Before anyone even ordered appetizers, a young, nervous waiter accidentally dripped a single drop of ice water near Bailey's designer handbag. It was a tiny mistake, but Bailey slammed her fist on the table and screamed at him, demanding he be fired for his incompetence. The whole room went quiet. As the terrified waiter retreated with tears in his eyes, I quietly slipped a crisp $100 bill into his apron pocket, whispering, "Don't let her ruin your night. You're doing a great job." My black executive briefcase rested securely against my ankle under the table. Right next to our private section, separated by a thin wooden divider, I noticed a man sitting in a crumpled Italian suit. He looked exhausted, frantically flipping through red-stamped bankruptcy documents. It was Marcus Thorne, the arrogant CEO of Glow Up Beauty, my sister's new boss. He was currently begging his corporate lawyers on a hushed phone call to save his sinking company before Monday. My father tapped his glass with a spoon. "Tonight, we celebrate Bailey, who successfully bounced back from a minor business slump to become regional VP of Glow Up Beauty." The table applauded loudly. She didn't abandon her family in times of trouble. She stayed loyal. He stared right at me. The chandeliers above cast harsh shadows on my father's scowling face. To Bailey's ultimate success, I didn't raise my glass. I took a slow, deliberate sip of my sparkling water. Pastor Tom looked at me with deep pity in his eyes. "Cora, after losing your seed money, how are you surviving out there in the big city? What exactly is your job?" Before I could even breathe to answer, Bailey let out a shrill, mocking cackle. She was obnoxiously swirling a neon pink cocktail. "Oh, Pastor, it's so sad. She literally mixes cheap bath bombs in a dingy basement." Bailey laughed loudly. "She's practically a glorified soap maker. It's pathetic." Aunt Penny frowned. "Is that true, dear? Just soap?" "We always knew she wasn't cut out for the fierce corporate world," my mother chimed in, smiling as if my failure was a relief. Uncle Jack laughed heartily. The ice clinked sharply in his bourbon glass. "Hey, at least she's keeping her hands clean." The whole table erupted in cruel, biting laughter. It was the kind of harsh laughter meant to make someone feel entirely worthless. At the next table, Marcus Thorne heard the words "Glow Up Beauty" and "soap maker." He glanced over his reading glasses, his face pale with stress, watching our table intently. Grandmother Martha slammed her good hand on the table. The heavy silverware rattled loudly. "Cora is a brilliant chemist," her voice rasped, weak but full of pure fire. "She is doing incredible things." My father aggressively sawed into a giant tomahawk steak. "Mom, don't encourage her delusions. We live in reality. Let Bailey have her spotlight." Great Aunt Eleanor's eyes narrowed into dangerous slits. She leaned forward. "The only delusion here is thinking a fake corporate title makes you a good person, Robert." The table went dead silent. Pastor Tom suddenly looked fascinated by his roasted asparagus. Martha squeezed my hand under the table. "I'm so sorry, my brave girl. They are so blind." "It's okay, grandmother. I whispered, my voice calm and completely steady. Tonight, I'm opening their eyes. Grandmother Martha's thin, trembling lips moved so softly that only I could hear her over the clinking of expensive crystal. The people who shout the loudest about family loyalty are usually the ones hiding their deepest guilt, she whispered, her voice like dry autumn leaves scraping against a window. I know, grandmother, I murmured back, but you shouldn't have to listen to this poison. I am old, not fragile, she replied, her pale blue eyes locking onto mine with fierce determination. I promised I would stay for this one dinner, and I will see it through. At the center of the massive oak table, my sister Bailey was already desperately pulling the spotlight back to herself. She dramatically grabbed her husband Trent's wrist, yanking his arm up so the chandelier light could catch his massive diamond-encrusted Rolex watch. Look what my glow-up beauty signing bonus bought, Bailey squealed, her voice piercing through the room like a police siren. Trent was practically drooling over this watch for months. I just walked into the boutique and dropped 20 grand in cash. That's what real corporate success looks like. My mother let out a high-pitched gasp of absolute delight. My father nodded approvingly, his chest puffing out with unwarranted pride. Trent, however, looked deeply uncomfortable, pulling his arm away and hiding the flashy watch under his napkin. He looked across the table at me, his forehead wrinkled in genuine confusion. Wait, Cora. Didn't you graduate at the top of your class with a degree in advanced molecular biology? He asked politely. Are you still doing science? Before I could even blink, Bailey let out a nasty, echoing snort. Oh my gosh, Trent, don't embarrass her. She mixes cheap lavender bath salts in her kitchen sink. She's practically a hobbyist. Trent frowned, his jaw clenching as he stared at his wife's cruel smile. He picked up his water glass and completely stopped talking. My father suddenly cleared his throat, banging his heavy knuckles against the mahogany table to demand absolute silence. Speaking of family wealth, he boomed, wiping a smear of steak juice from his chin. Your mother and I met with the estate lawyers this morning. We are transferring the deed to the historic lakeside cabin entirely to Bailey and Trent. A heavy, suffocating silence dropped over the room. Aunt Penny stopped chewing her dinner roll. Cousin Maya actually dropped her phone into her lap. That historic lakeside cabin was the only place I had ever felt safe as a child. It was where Great Aunt Eleanor had taught me how to fish. We feel the cabin should go to the daughter who actually stayed loyal and respected our family values, my father added coldly, staring directly into my eyes like he was trying to freeze my blood. I didn't flinch. I calmly rested my hands on my emerald green pantsuit. My heart didn't break, because they had already broken it 5 years ago when they stole my seed money. I felt absolutely nothing but cold, sharp clarity. Great Aunt Eleanor, however, looked ready to start a war. Her knuckles turned bright white as she gripped the edge of the table. Robert, you are a foolish, bitter man, she hissed, her voice dripping with pure venom. It's my property, Eleanor, my father snapped back, his face turning the color of an overripe tomato. Cora made her bed when she walked out on us. She gets nothing. I reached under the table and gently squeezed Eleanor's trembling hand. Let him keep the cabin, Auntie, I said smoothly. I prefer the ocean anyway. Bailey, sensing the tension, immediately jumped back in to control the narrative. She leaned over her plate of untouched lobster, her eyes wide with dramatic gossip. Okay, enough boring legal stuff. Let me tell you the real secret about my new job at Glow Up Beauty. Everyone leaned in like eager puppies. Our company is secretly being bought out by some massive faceless cosmetics empire, Bailey bragged loudly. Some idiot phantom investor is dumping millions into our brand. The new CEO is totally clueless about the beauty industry. But don't worry, I'm going to completely manipulate this new billionaire buyer into tripling my salary by Christmas. They won't even know what hit them. My mother clapped her hands together in glee. Oh, honey, you are so brilliant. You will run that company in no time. On the other side of the thin wooden divider, Marcus Thorne, the panicked CEO of Glow Up Beauty, accidentally dropped his heavy silver fork. It hit his porcelain plate with a loud echoing clang that startled our entire table. He was sweating profusely, wiping his forehead with a cloth napkin, looking absolutely terrified as he listened to his employee insult the mysterious buyer who held his entire financial future. I didn't turn my head to look at him. I just smiled softly. My heavy black executive briefcase, resting perfectly against my ankle, felt like a loaded weapon waiting to be fired. Bailey's cruel laughter echoed off the mahogany walls like screeching metal. I probably shouldn't say too much. It's all highly confidential corporate strategy, she boasted, aggressively twirling a lock of her blonde hair. But between us, Once the new phantom buyer takes over Glow Up Beauty, my first move is to fire all the older, useless staff. I'm going to clean house and replace them with cheap interns to boost my own bonus. Grandmother Martha's frail chest stopped rising for a second. She went completely still, absolutely disgusted by the venom coming from her own granddaughter. At the table right next to us, a sharp, terrifying sound pierced the air. Crash! Marcus Thorne, his hands shaking uncontrollably, had knocked his $200 glass of Merlot right off his table. The dark red wine bled into the white carpet like a fresh wound. He didn't even look at the broken glass. He was staring directly at me, his jaw practically unhinged. I calmly placed both my hands flat on the table. I turned my head just a fraction to the left in a single, icy motion. Marcus Thorne, the man my sister called her boss, was a sweaty, hyperventilating mess. He had just recognized me. We had been on 8 grueling, top-secret video conference calls over the last 2 weeks to finalize his bankrupt company's buyout. He knew exactly who the phantom investor was. He stared at me, his eyes wide with pure, unadulterated terror. I didn't smile. I didn't frown. I gave him the tiniest, most microscopic nod of my chin. It wasn't a greeting. It was a silent command, "I own you." Marcus swallowed hard, looking like he was about to pass out from lack of oxygen. He abruptly shoved his chair back, leaving his expensive bankruptcy documents scattered all over the floor, and practically sprinted toward the restaurant's back exit to make a frantic phone call. Great Aunt Eleanor leaned toward my ear, her heavy silver necklace clinking. "Who on earth was that frightened little man?" she whispered, highly amused. "Just an employee of mine, Auntie," I whispered back. Eleanor let out a low, raspy chuckle that sounded like a beautiful melody. "Oh, this is going to be spectacular," she murmured. Grandmother Martha started coughing weakly. Her oxygen tank hissed softly. "I'll go get the waiter to brew you a fresh cup of organic chamomile tea," I said, standing up from my chair. I walked toward the kitchen doors, but before I could reach the server station, 2 angry figures blocked my path near the freezing, drafty coat check room. My mother grabbed my left wrist, her perfectly manicured claws digging painfully into my skin. My father stepped right in front of me, his breath smelling strongly of garlic and expensive cigars. "What do you think you're doing, Cora?" my father snarled, his voice a low, dangerous whisper. "You are sitting there like a dark storm cloud. If you don't walk back to that table right now and publicly raise your glass to toast Bailey's Glow Up Beauty promotion, I will have the hospice guards ban you from seeing your grandmother tomorrow." My mother yanked my arm. "Just smile and be normal for once. Stop embarrassing us with your miserable attitude." I looked at both of them. My heart, which used to break whenever they yelled at me, felt like solid, unbreakable titanium. "You stole my $75,000 seed money 5 years ago, Dad. You told me I was useless." I reached into the inner pocket of my emerald green pantsuit. I pulled out a folded piece of paper. It was a blank, signed cashier's check from my massive business account. "You thought money controlled me," I said. Slowly, right in front of their greedy eyes, I ripped the check into tiny, meaningless shreds and let them fall to the restaurant floor like snow. My father's face turned purple with absolute rage. He raised his hand, pointing a thick finger right at my face. "You ungrateful little..." Suddenly, the young waiter I had tipped earlier stepped right between us, holding a silver tray of hot tea. "Excuse me, ma'am," he said, looking bravely at me while physically blocking my father. "Do you need me to call the restaurant security? These people seem to be bothering you." My father stepped back, totally humiliated that a simple waiter had scolded him in public. I smiled warmly at the young man. "No, thank you. I'm just finishing a conversation." I turned back to my parents. "You demanded I stay out of your way 5 years ago. I did. Now I suggest you stay out of mine." Before I walk back to that table with grandmother's tea, I want to step outside the story for just a second. If you're reading this and your chest feels tight right now, I know exactly what you are feeling. That crushing moment when the people who are supposed to protect you try to tear you down, simply because your light hurts their eyes. It breaks a person, but it also builds you. If you have ever survived a toxic family like this, pause and type one word in the comments: survivor. I promise I will read every single one. And please hit subscribe if you haven't yet. What happens when I sit back down is going to shake the ground. Let's go back to the table. Dessert arrived just as I sat back down. The waiters marched out carrying a massive, obnoxious chocolate cake shaped like a lipstick tube, shooting bright neon sparklers into the air. Bailey squealed, clapping her hands like a spoiled toddler on her birthday. She immediately grabbed her smartphone and forced the entire table to lean in for a group selfie, but she blatantly angled the camera to crop me entirely out of the frame. "Smile for the glow-up beauty queen," she shrieked, the camera flash reflecting blindly off her diamond earrings. She grabbed a silver knife and cut into the dessert. The thick pink frosting looked sickeningly sweet. She pointed her fork directly at my chest. "You know, running a major corporate beauty empire is absolutely exhausting," she sighed dramatically, rolling her eyes for maximum effect. "It takes fierce vision and ruthless leadership. Cora, no offense, but I am so incredibly glad you never tried to start a real business. You're just too meek and fragile. Selling homemade soap online is perfectly safe for someone with your limited potential." My mother nodded vigorously, her heavy pearl necklace bouncing against her collarbone. "Exactly. Cora has always been our little behind-the-scenes helper. Some people are meant to lead, and some are meant to follow." Right at that moment, at the next table over, a chair scraped violently against the floorboards. It was Marcus Thorne. He had stumbled back into the dining room from his frantic phone call, his face the color of old ashes. He collapsed heavily into his seat, breathing in short, panicked gasps. His terrified eyes were glued to my every move. He looked like a man standing on the train tracks watching the express train rushing right at him. Under the heavy mahogany table, Great Aunt Eleanor's warm, wrinkled hand firmly grabbed my knee. She squeezed exactly 3 times. It was our secret signal. I turned my head to look at Grandmother Martha. Her breathing was shallow under the clear plastic oxygen mask, but her pale blue eyes were burning with a fierce, protective fire. "It is time, my brilliant girl," Grandmother rasped, her voice cutting sharply through the smell of roasted garlic and cheap perfume. "Are you sure, Grandmother?" "I didn't come here to ruin your Thanksgiving dinner," I whispered. Grandmother shook her head slowly. "They ruined this family 5 years ago when they stole your future. You are simply here to deliver the final autopsy report. Speak your truth, Cora." I took a long, deep breath of the truffle-scented air. I looked across the table at my sister. Bailey had smears of sticky pink frosting on her teeth and was laughing loudly at a joke Uncle Jack had just made. She had absolutely no clue that a massive Category 5 hurricane was about to destroy her perfectly constructed fake world. Great Aunt Eleanor silently slid the thick manila envelope she had given me earlier right next to my water glass. It was time to end this. I reached down to the floor. I grabbed the handle of my heavy black executive briefcase. Slowly, I pulled it up and placed it squarely on top of the white linen tablecloth. Bailey stopped laughing instantly. Her arrogant smile vanished. Her eyes darted suspiciously to the high-end leather bag. What exactly are you doing? Please don't tell me you brought your little soap samples to pass out. This is a 5-star restaurant, Cora, not a cheap weekend flea market." My father slammed his heavy fist down. The silverware jumped off the tablecloth. "Put that ugly bag away right now, Cora. Stop begging for attention. This is Bailey's night." Pastor Tom froze completely, his coffee cup hovering halfway to his mouth. Aunt Penny stared at me with wide, terrified eyes. "Actually, Bailey," I said. My voice was as cold and smooth as a frozen lake. "You've been doing a whole lot of talking tonight about your massive promotion. But nobody at this table has actually asked what my real job title is." Bailey let out a nervous, high-pitched giggle that sounded like a dying bird. "Okay, fine, let's humor her. What is your grand title, Cora? Lead bath bomb mixer? Chief bubble maker? Tell us so we can go back to celebrating my success." I didn't blink. I didn't frown. I reached out and methodically spun the polished brass combination dials on my briefcase. Click, click. The sharp, metallic sound echoed like a gunshot in the suddenly dead silent room. I popped the silver latches. I opened the briefcase. And I pulled out the massive, 60-page leather-bound legal binder. I laid the heavy leather-bound legal binder flat on the table. Beside it, I placed the sealed manila envelope Aunt Eleanor had given me. The entire room was so quiet you could hear the rhythmic, hissing sound of Grandmother's oxygen tank. My mother's fake pearl necklace trembled frantically against her throat. Uncle Jack lowered his bourbon glass with a shaking, sweaty hand, his mouth hanging slightly open. I didn't rush. I flipped open the binder. The first thing I pulled out wasn't a corporate document. It was a pristine, glossy copy of Global Business Weekly magazine. I slid it across the stiff white linen tablecloth directly toward Bailey. My face was on the cover, wearing the very same emerald green pantsuit I had on right now. The bold yellow headline read, "Cora Sterling, the billionaire chemist who built Lumina Labs from scratch." I wasn't going to say anything. My voice was steady and perfectly calibrated, like a high-end microscope. But since you demanded to know my exact job title, Bailey stared at the magazine cover. Her heavily contoured jaw practically hit her dinner plate. Her eyes darted back and forth across the glossy page in pure denial. This is a total fake, she shrieked, her voice cracking like cheap plastic. You paid someone to print this. It's a pathetic joke. She lunged forward to rip the magazine in half, but her hand slipped. She sliced her thumb deeply on the thick, glossy paper, letting out a sharp yelp of sudden pain. I didn't flinch. I calmly pulled the top corporate document from the legal binder. At 8 a.m. this morning, Lumina Labs officially acquired Glow Up Beauty in a total cash buyout, I stated, my words landing like heavy cement blocks on the table. The mysterious phantom buyer is me, Bailey. I own your entire company. I am your absolute boss. My father's face turned the sickening pale shade of spoiled milk. Cora, what kind of twisted, sick prank is this? He demanded, his thick neck veins bulging with absolute fury. Ask your boss, I replied calmly. I didn't even have to turn around. Marcus Thorne was already walking toward us, his expensive Italian leather shoes dragging heavily across the floorboards. He looked exactly like a condemned prisoner walking slowly to the gallows. He stopped right behind Bailey's chair. To the absolute shock of the entire restaurant, Marcus physically bowed his head, his shoulders slumped in utter pathetic defeat. Miss Sterling, he stammered, addressing me with raw, humiliating panic shining in his watery eyes. I beg you, please don't liquidate our staff on Monday. I had no idea your sister worked for my branch. I deeply apologize for her terrible behavior. Bailey froze, her eyes bulging out of her head like a caught fish. Marcus, what are you doing? Tell them she's lying. Marcus glared at her with pure, unfiltered disgust, twisting his features. Shut your mouth, Bailey. Miss Sterling just bought our entire operation for $50 million. Effective immediately, your executive position is suspended pending a severe HR review. My mother let out a loud, theatrical gasp. She dramatically pressed the back of her trembling hand to her forehead and slumped sideways in her chair, pretending to faint from the sheer shock of the moment. Great Aunt Eleanor didn't even blink. She reached out and slapped her open palm sharply against the heavy oak table. Stop the pathetic theatrics, Susan. We all know you're faking it, Eleanor barked, her voice echoing with a terrifying, undeniable authority. My mother instantly sat bolt upright, her cheeks burning crimson red with deep embarrassment. Then Eleanor proudly picked up the manila envelope and opened it. You all thought Cora was suffering alone these past 5 years, Eleanor said, her eyes blazing with fierce, undeniable pride. But I have been her secret, silent business partner since day one. I was the one who handed her the insider financial reports about Glow Up Beauty's impending bankruptcy. I helped her orchestrate this exact moment. The table erupted in chaos. My father gripped his steak knife so hard his knuckles looked like polished white stones. You plotted this. He spat at me, tiny drops of spit flying from his trembling lips. You came here to destroy your sister's career and humiliate this family. I finally stood up from my chair. I looked down at my father, feeling 10 feet taller than his petty, pathetic rage. I came to Chicago to hold my dying grandmother's hand, I said, my voice ringing out clear and sharp as a silver bell. Bailey practically dragged me to this dinner. You ordered me to sit here and be quiet while she openly insulted me. I didn't lie, I didn't steal, I simply handed you the honest truth. I looked at my entire family. 5 years ago you stole my money and told me I was entirely useless. So I walked away, and I built an empire with my own 2 hands. I am totally done shrinking to make you feel big. The entire restaurant was suddenly plunged into a stunned, breathless silence. The restaurant was absolutely dead quiet, save for the howling Chicago wind rattling the frosted window panes. My father collapsed back into his chair, staring blankly at his cold, untouched steak as if it held the secrets of the universe. Pastor Tom stood up slowly, buttoning his thick tweed jacket. He turned to face the entire room, refusing to hide his shame. Cora, I am deeply ashamed, he announced, his voice echoing with genuine regret. I blindly believed the vicious lies your parents spun about you for 5 years. Please forgive an old fool. Aunt Penny walked over and gently rested her warm, trembling hand on my shoulder. We should have checked on you, sweetheart. I am so sorry we abandoned you. Bailey abruptly stood up. Her heavy chair screeched violently against the hardwood floor. Her face was a mess of ruined mascara and smeared foundation. Without a single word, she grabbed her designer purse and sprinted toward the exit. Trent watched her go, his jaw clamped tight, refusing to chase after her. He simply drank his water, his eyes glued to the table. I knelt down beside Grandmother Martha's wheelchair. The comforting scent of her peppermint lotion anchored my racing heart. "Grandmother," I whispered. She reached out and cupped my cheek with her freezing, fragile fingers. "I knew my brilliant girl would finally roar," she wheezed, a beautiful, triumphant spark dancing in her tired eyes. "I didn't want to cause this massive storm," I admitted. "Sometimes the toxic forest needs to burn down so new life can grow," she replied softly, stroking my hair just like she did when I was a little girl. "You didn't start the fire, Cora. You just finally stopped letting them burn you." I smiled, a genuine, soul-deep smile that I hadn't felt in 5 agonizing years. I picked up my fork and took a large bite of the dessert. The rich chocolate melted perfectly on my tongue. I wheeled Martha out of the restaurant myself. As we headed for the exit, my mother tried to frantically chase after me, but Great Aunt Eleanor aggressively stepped into the narrow aisle, crossing her arms like a fierce, immovable fortress, blocking my mother's path completely. After tucking Martha safely into her hospital bed, I walked out to the hospice parking lot. A violent gust of icy wind almost knocked me off my feet, whipping my hair wildly around my face. I felt completely awake. I sat inside my freezing SUV. My phone screen lit up. A text from Trent. "I am so incredibly sorry. I had absolutely no idea they stole from you." I read it, but I didn't reply. Then a message from Leo, my chief scientist. "The Glow Up Beauty acquisition is officially trending on Wall Street. You are a legend. Get some rest." I quickly typed back, "See you Monday, Leo." Then came the angry text from Bailey. "You are a complete monster. You just destroyed my entire career." I stared at the glowing digital letters illuminating the dark car. I typed, "Your terrible choices destroyed your career, not me." But then I stopped. I deleted it. I tossed the phone onto the passenger seat, finally free of the desperate need to argue or defend myself. I drove back to my luxurious corner suite at the Ritz-Carlton. I ordered a $100 plate of fresh strawberries and cream from midnight room service, simply because I could. I slept for 8 solid, uninterrupted hours, buried under a mountain of heavy down comforters. Saturday morning, exactly at 8:30 a.m., I was sitting in the brightly lit, sterile Mercy Care Center cafeteria. Bailey found me sitting by the window. She looked completely defeated. She wore oversized, wrinkled gray sweatpants, her blonde hair tangled in a messy bun, and her eyes were puffy and bloodshot from crying all night. She sat down across from me without asking. "Cora, please," she begged, her voice cracking pitifully. "Remember when we were little, and we used to build those massive pillow forts in the living room? We are sisters. You can't just let HR fire me. Trent and I will lose the deposit on our new house. We stopped being sisters the day you sat in that living room and smiled while our parents robbed me of my $75,000 seed money," I replied, my voice completely flat and devoid of any emotion. Bailey stared at me, her jaw dropping in absolute horror. "You're really going to be this petty? Over a few $1,000s from 5 years ago? This isn't about the money, Bailey. This is about Lumina Labs' corporate policy." I leaned slightly forward, my hands calmly folded on the cold stainless steel cafeteria table. "Glow Up Beauty is now under my direct authority. If you want to discuss your employment status, you will need to email my head of human resources, Sarah, on Monday. She handles all integration terminations." "You're actually going to make me go through HR, your own flesh and blood?" Tears of pure desperation spilled over her lower eyelids. "Yes, because I am a CEO, not your babysitter. Your terrible sales numbers and toxic management style will speak for themselves on Monday morning." Bailey stood up abruptly, her chair scraped loudly across the cheap linoleum floor. "You will always be a lonely, miserable freak," she hissed, before spinning around and marching out of the cafeteria doors. I sat there for a moment, completely unfazed. The morning sun finally broke through the heavy gray Chicago clouds, casting a warm golden light through the window pane. I stood up and headed straight to grandmother's room. I was sitting in the corner chair, gently rubbing grandmother's feet, when the heavy wooden door pushed open. My father stood there. He was wearing his expensive camel hair overcoat, but he looked completely deflated, like a balloon that had been slowly leaking air for 3 days. He didn't step fully into the room. He just lingered awkwardly near the threshold. "Cora," he started, his voice rough and scratching against the silence. "Your mother and I have made a final decision. We are entirely removing your name from the family trust. The antique lakeside cabin, the massive stock portfolio. All of it goes exclusively to Bailey. You get absolutely nothing." I didn't even look up from grandmother's feet. Dad, you drained my only trust fund 5 years ago. You can't fire me from a family I already quit. He opened his mouth to argue, but Grandmother Martha suddenly shifted her weight in the hospital bed. Her breathing was heavily labored, but her voice carried a terrifying weight. Robert, you are a pathetic, cowardly man. Sit down. Mom, this is between me and… I said, sit down. The sheer force of her command made my father physically flinch. He stumbled back and sank into the hard plastic visitor's chair, looking exactly like a scolded schoolboy sent to the principal's office. Martha stared at him, the beeping of her heart monitor setting a tense, rhythmic beat in the room. I have watched you torture this brilliant girl for 29 years, Robert. First for being smarter than you, then for leaving you, and now for succeeding without you. But it ends today. Martha turned her weak gaze to me. Cora, Great-Aunt Eleanor and I met with the estate attorneys yesterday afternoon. My historic brownstone in Boston, the one your father has been drooling over for a decade, is going entirely to you. You are the sole inheritor. My father jumped up from the plastic chair. Mom, you can't be serious. That brownstone is worth $5 million. I am your son. And Cora is the only one in this family with a spine, Martha fired back, her frail chest heaving with exertion. The paperwork is already legally binding, Robert. Get out of my sight. My father stood frozen in absolute shock. He looked at me with pure, unadulterated hatred burning in his eyes, but he had absolutely no power left. He turned on his heel and stormed out, slamming the heavy door so hard the framed painting on the wall rattled violently. We are so close to the end of the story now, but there is one final piece you need to hear. What Great-Aunt Eleanor told me out in the freezing hallway about the real dark reason this family operated the way it did. If you are still here with me, hold on just a little bit longer. Let's finish this. I stepped out into the sterile, freezing hospital hallway, closing Grandmother's door softly behind me. Great-Aunt Eleanor was waiting by the coffee machine, her heavy silver necklace resting against her dark sweater. She looked like a fragile porcelain doll, but her spirit was stronger than iron. I have a dark, hidden secret to tell you, Cora, Eleanor whispered, handing me a warm cup of coffee. About the night your parents stole your $75,000 seed money. I took a sip, the bitter liquid warming my chest. I already know, Auntie. They needed to bail out Bailey's failing business and pay for her ridiculous wedding. That is the lie they told you, Eleanor corrected, her eyes narrowing. The truth is your father was secretly drowning in massive credit card debt. His own small insurance agency was failing terribly. He was terrified you would build an empire while he lost everything. He stole your money to pay off his own secret loans, and he used Bailey's wedding as the perfect cover story. He crushed your wings so he wouldn't look small. I stood there in silence. For 5 years I thought my parents simply loved my sister more than me. But learning that my father's betrayal was born from his own pathetic insecurities felt like a heavy weight lifting off my shoulders. I finally understood that their cruelty had absolutely nothing to do with my worth. It was just a poisonous cycle of jealousy. 3 days later, the soft, rhythmic beeping of the heart monitor finally slowed down. Holding my hand and Aunt Eleanor's hand, Grandmother Martha peacefully took her final breath. The golden morning light streaming through the blinds touched her cheek, leaving a gentle, peaceful smile on her resting face. She left me a handwritten letter tucked inside a vintage silver mirror. The last line read, "Forgive them if you can, but never let them back in. Keep shining, my brilliant girl." My parents tried to host a massive funeral filled with fake tears to show off to their friends, but Eleanor and I didn't attend. Instead, we held a private, quiet memorial by the crashing waves of Lake Michigan. Just the two of us, tossing white roses into the freezing water and sharing our favorite memories of her. On Tuesday morning, I returned to my state-of-the-art Lumina Labs facility. The moment I walked through the glass doors, my loyal scientific team clapping warmly greeted me. I breathed in the familiar smell of clean chemicals and progress. I slipped on my crisp white lab coat and sat at my large desk. My head of HR, Sarah, walked in and handed me a thick stack of official HR termination papers. Right on top was Bailey's executive file. Without a single ounce of hesitation or regret, I signed my name with a single smooth stroke of my black fountain pen. I had officially severed the final toxic tie to my sister. She was no longer my problem. I took a deep cleansing breath of purified lab air. I spent the rest of the afternoon at my formulation station. I began mixing delicate drops of pure peppermint extract, blending them with the scent of old parchment and vanilla, the exact comforting smell of my grandmother. I named the new formula Martha's Grace. It was a healing serum designed to soothe broken skin, packaged in a beautiful frosted glass bottle. It wasn't about making money anymore. It was about honoring the woman who loved me when I had nothing. That evening, I sat in Aunt Eleanor's luxurious vintage penthouse. A crackling brick fireplace kept the massive room warm. I held a warm mug of rich hot chocolate, wrapped securely in a thick wool blanket. Outside the tall windows, the city of Chicago twinkling like a million tiny diamonds looked breathtaking. I looked at Eleanor, who was peacefully reading a book across from me. I realized that I had built a completely new family. We weren't tied together by guilt or manipulation. We were bound by genuine love, not guilty obligations. Losing my toxic family wasn't a tragedy. It was my quietest, most beautiful victory. With the soft jazz playing softly in the background, I took a sip of my drink, and for the first time in my entire life, my heart felt completely whole. We have reached the end of this journey, and I want to take a moment to thank you for walking this difficult but beautiful path with me. This story is a masterpiece of resilience, a reminder that the deepest betrayals can sometimes force us to turn our scars into unimaginable strength. If Cora's journey touched your heart, or if you found a piece of your own story in her courage to walk away and build a safe haven in the storm, please like this video and subscribe to the channel. Let's keep this community a place for healing, truth, and stories that leave us with warm, glowing embers of hope. Stay strong, and I will see you in the next story.